Hello and welcome to another episode of Feeding Fatty. This is Roy.
This is Terry.
And we are a show, we try to bring a lot of different views to the table. We all struggle in some ways with our getting our fitness plan going, eating right, vegetables, meat, how much, what do you do, what's recommended, what's good for you, what do you like. So we try to bring, this is not only about our journey, mine and Terry's journey, but together. But we also like to bring guests who are more experts, in their field in different areas that have to do with diet and nutrition. And today we have an awesome guest that, we were kind of joking a little bit in the pre-show that, more we have read about him, the less that we truly understand what is going on. So it's going to be an interesting show for all of us to learn. But we are grateful that Mark Merriwether Vorderbruggen, hope I got that right. Yeah. He is a Ph.D. And we're going to, Merriwether is what he goes by in kind of the plant world. So that's where we're going to go with that. And so Merriwether grew up in the wilds of Minnesota, where his parents and grandparents utilized the amazing wild foods and medicinal plants found in local woods, fields, and lakes. The oneness with nature that Dr. Vorderbruggen has known since childhood is a foundation of who he is today. So, Merriwether, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's just talk a little bit about. Tell us a little bit about growing up, kind of what led you, because I know that you are very outdoorsy, and I've seen you reference yourself as a forager, and so those would be some good jumping off points to kind of talk about those.
Sure. So, like you mentioned, growing up in Minnesota, and both my parents were big into outdoors, and every day we were out in the woods behind our house, the fields, the rivers, the lakes, things like that. It was part of their upbringing of us, as giving us a deep connection to nature. And one of the things that played a role in that was eating the different wild foods that we were finding. Okay. Yeah, so that played a big role.
Okay.
Both my parents were high school education, but children of the Great Depression. So one of the things that was very important was the idea of food security, because they grew up in a time, their childhood, where that was an issue.
Right.
So that was always important to us. Concurrent with that, I knew I was going to be a scientist. I used to drive my elementary school teacher nuts with different questions that they couldn't answer about science. I was starting to read science textbooks at a very young age. And by the time I got to college, it became obvious that what I want to do is study plant chemistry, because when it gets down to it, the chemicals in the plants are fascinating. They've evolved. I tell people, if you can't run, you have to fight. And plants can't run, so they have to fight. So they have to develop all sorts of really interesting compounds that turn out have benefit for humans too.
Okay.
And so that led into kind of a long and twisted path down herbal medicine. But at the same time, my original plan was to go into pharmaceuticals and become, my master's degree was in medicinal chemistry. My Ph.D. was in physical organic chemistry. So not making molecules, but figuring out which molecule you need to accomplish a certain task.
Yeah.
I got sidetracked with 18 years in the oil industry. But during that time, I was using my knowledge of natural products to come up with new environmentally friendly, safer ways of accomplishing oil field tasks. I got 14 patents. The first one was using cinnamon as a corrosion inhibitor. And it just went from there.
Interesting.
Yeah, but finally, after many, many years, I was able to take that chemistry back into the medicinal side, working for a company as their chemist herbal formulator for dietary supplements, using ancient plants for modern issues. But there's a whole nother side to the world, too.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that is a long and interesting road through the oil patch back to plants.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, always with plants, just
Yeah.
but yeah.
So, we talked a little bit about the foraging aspect, and you were saying that because growing up in more of an urban environment, even though we lived, kind of in the country, what we called it, we had gardens, but we would never go out and pick anything. Well, we were always scolded against never pick anything up off the ground and put it in your mouth.
Right.
We weren't, not that they're all bad, but we weren't smart enough to determine the good from the bad. So, that's kind of an interesting concept of being able to go out into the fields and know. I guess the first step is being able to identify what is edible and what is something you need to stay away from.
Definitely. There's a basic rule of thumb. I teach foraging classes all around Texas and actually around the nation now.
Okay.
And I tell people when you are, there's lots of good books and websites and so forth to help people identify plants, even apps, though I don't trust the apps. But I say you got to match at least 5 structural features of the plant. The edge of the leaf, the vein pattern of the leaf, the arrangement of the leaves, the flower, the number of petals, the color. There's lots and lots of structural features, but you need to match at least 5 of them to whatever resource you're using to identify the plant next to you.
Oh, okay.
Really, the secret is start on your doorstep, look at your trees, identify your trees, and then Google, elm tree edible, and figure out, what you can do with that. Then look at the bushes, then look at the flowers, then go down into the weeds and identify the weeds, and then just expand from there. A lot of people make the mistake of taking a foraging book out in the woods thinking, I'm going to learn edible plants. And they look at the sea of green and they look at this thick book and they go back home.
Right, exactly.
So, it's easier if you identify the plant and then look up its edible and medicinal uses.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was going to say is where do you start, or ask where do you start? It's just so overwhelming because there's so much.
Yep.
Yeah, and I guess like you said, the overwhelmingness of when you walk out, even though there are differences to the trained eye, I'm sure that, to the untrained eye, it's like a lot of stuff, they all look the same. So that is
Yeah, so I just block it out. It's like, nope.
I get so many pictures of a vine wrapped around a tree that people think is one plant, and it's like, no, they're two distinct plants here, and it's,
So what are the benefits? Are there, I know that in the Western world, we have lost a lot of that medicinal use of plants, that there's a lot that's good out there. But for a minute, talk about the nutritional. Are there a lot of nutritional values that are good for us in plants that we may find growing out in the wild?
Oh, definitely. That's another thing that makes me laugh at gardeners. Nothing personal with gardeners, but you guys work way too hard. It's funny to see a lot of the weeds they are pulling up and throwing out are often more nutritious than the plants that they're growing.
Oh my gosh.
One of the aspects of the domestication of plants was to alter it in a way that makes it more convenient for the humans to harvest, or store, to a point. But in a lot of those changes, basically the plant said, okay, if you take care of me, I will make it easier for you to eat me. But in that process, they did lose some of the nutritional value. Whereas the wild plants, they are constantly fighting, they can't run. So they still have a lot of their initial vitamins, minerals. Dandelions are always a great example, the most hated weed, and it should be the most loved weed on the planet because the leaves are loaded with the vitamins and minerals, even a little protein. The flowers have medicinal properties. The roots can go down 12 feet and they have amazing medicinal uses. Yeah. And when a dandelion dies, you have now worked, organic matter 12 feet down into the soil. So one of the things that makes them so nutritious is they have, this deep, long reservoir of minerals that they can bring up back into their leaves. That's why they show up in damaged areas, because when it rains, a lot of water-soluble minerals get percolated down deep into the soil, so the top layer of the soil becomes dead. Nothing can grow in there. The dandelions can. They send the roots down deep and remineralize. And then other plants go, oh, this soil is good. And they come in and they crowd out the dandelions, and the dandelions just sulk away.
Interesting. Interesting.
Huh.
Yeah.
So that is one thing that you have seen. I mean, you're currently in the Houston area. You grew up in Minnesota. I mean, that's about as far, you grew up about as far north as you can go. And now you're living about as far south as you can go in the U.S. And then, it's the terrain is different. The climate certainly different. But what is the diversity of plants that we may find from one area to the other? I mean, is it like a whole new? Is it like a whole new? I mean, I'm sure there's some that translate from both areas, but in Houston, are you finding a lot more different stuff than what you found in Minnesota?
It's funny. The main difference is the time when the plants show up.
Okay.
So a lot of the summertime, well, a lot of the wintertime weeds in Houston, things like wild violets and cleavers and curled dock, those are summertime plants up north. And then the summertime plants are down here in Texas are the deep summer, like the July, August weeds there. Yeah. I've been down here since '97, and I still get confused as to what time of year it is because I kind of rely on the plants to be my calendar.
Yeah.
And like now I know when I see the blackberry flowers, I know it's time to do my taxes. Down here, they start showing up in the beginning of April. It's like, damn, the blackberry flowers. They're tasty, but, you know. And then when the curled dock starts showing up, I know it's time to buy my Halloween candy. But up in Minnesota, it was time to buy the Easter candy. You know,
yeah.
So
yeah.
It's different things like that. Plants don't really follow, you know, political boundaries. They follow, you know, ecosystem boundaries. And so the ecosystems, you can find the similar ecosystems all over. Now, there are certain plants that are hot weather plants or coastal, you know, saltwater coastal plants that we don't have in Minnesota. Yeah. But for the most part, a lot of the plants, if you look for the ecosystem, you'll find the plants.
Okay. The other thing you kind of mentioned too when we were talking pre-show is that there are a lot more benefits to foraging than just the nutrition or the medicinal purposes that we can pull out of the plants. Could you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Oh boy, yes. I'll try to keep it down to a little bit because this is one of my most passionate things here.
Okay.
But yeah, so yeah, the vitamins and minerals and medicinal properties and all that are great from the wild plants, but there's a whole another level of health that people don't understand or don't realize. So I like to tell the problem with the world is it's flat. Now, we're not talking flat earth sort of thing. We're talking paved sidewalks, you know, tiles, all that. Yeah. We did not evolve on a flat earth. We evolved on a slippery, you know, unbalanced, rocky, tripping hazard sort of thing with things hunting us. So our brains, our bodies are designed to be out walking around on uneven ground. And in doing so, that requires a lot more mental action, which helps stimulate the brain, and the brain needs stimulation. So by, you know, trying to keep our balance on uneven surfaces and so forth, our brain is much more engaged in what we're doing. One of the things they've found, besides helping stave off dementia later in life, it also helps with things like attention deficit disorder and so forth, because you are giving that brain the input it evolved to get. If it's not getting that sort of input, it's like a caged beast. It's starting pacing. It starts finding ways to amuse itself. So when you're out walking on uneven ground, your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. At the same time, you're looking, you're smelling, all your senses are coming into play.
Right.
At the same time, your core muscles, you know, people, you know, for exercise, they run on a treadmill. If you really want exercise, go running across a rocky field, you know,
right.
It takes a while, you know, or uneven, slippery thing. Because again, as you are trying to maintain your balance in a really topsy-turvy, slippery thing, your core muscles are getting a much stronger workout. You're getting a more full body workout. That's like right now they have all these platforms where you stand on and they vibrate and so forth. And they say it's, you know, to activate all the muscles. Well, you know, go for a walk in the wild. Yeah. You're going to get this. If you are crossing a fallen tree over a stream, you are using a lot of muscles you aren't using pushing a shopping cart down, you know, HEB corridor.
Right.
And especially if you're carrying stuff, and you know, in Texas, obviously, you're going to have a lot of water that you're carrying with you because it's hot out. So it's like a much more full body workout. Yeah. You're bending, you're stretching, you're digging, you're climbing. Occasionally, you're running like hell. You know, foraging. It's a full body workout. It's not just picking things off a shelf in a grocery store. So that physical action and that mental action have amazingly good benefits for the body.
Yeah, and those are good points. The actually, I just posted an article on another website that we run that was talking about if you walk for certain periods of, like a longer period of time, if you walk consistently over about 6 years, I think they said it dramatically reduces our chances of Alzheimer's. So, that's good to know. The other thing that I was thinking as you were talking about that is, I go exercise for the exercise benefit that I get, my muscles and all of that. But the other thing that's interesting is when you're out either exercising or foraging, you're not eating. So for people that are trying to help their weight, there's kind of like it's a double benefit. You're getting the exercise, but you're not sitting in front of a TV, eating as well. So.
Well, I will say, if you're foraging, you're probably munching as you go, but it's going to be very low calorie stuff.
Right.
It's easy to get vitamins and minerals and all this stuff. Calories is the hard part.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and we, me and Terry were talking yesterday. We talked briefly about this. About can you, would it be hard for working people, with a decent sized piece of land, ordered, to grow enough food or to forage enough to actually survive? And that was one thing. The point that you did bring up was that we could get all the nutrients and everything we need, but the actual caloric intake would be very, very difficult to achieve.
Yeah, you would probably the best caloric intake from an evolutionary point of view is animal fat.
Okay.
And which doesn't store well, so you would have to have some sort of fatty animals growing there.
Yeah.
Corn and so forth has some benefit, but really, you can do it if you are willing to do, 100% buy-in.
Sure.
On the other hand, if I may, getting 10% of your diet from the wild, pretty reasonable, even in city folk. There's, if I can go sideways for a second, a number of people say, hey, I live in the city. Everything has got to be contaminated. I can't eat any of the weeds. Well, actually, they've done some really interesting studies looking at the potential contamination in urban plants, mainly up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and in Boston and a few other cities. And they found them to be, clean. They don't have any of the pesticides, heavy metals, anything like that there. There'd be absolutely no reason a person couldn't eat them. Usually the main reasons are laws against it. Like here in the state of Texas, it's actually illegal to take a piece of plant material from a property without the property owner's permission. It needs to go back to the sheep and cattle wars of the 1800s. But city parks and things like that, it's verboten to take plants from there. And part of that is if everyone starts doing that. In states where they don't have laws against it, they're finding, especially in like the last 5 years, the parks and places are getting stripped of plants because people are, harvesting over. There's a thing called the tragedy of the commons. It's an economic theory that if there is an open space that's open to everyone with the resource on it, whoever grabs that resource first is the one that benefits economically. And so there's always someone who is going to try and do that to better themselves rather than leave it for everyone. So.
Right. So we've talked a lot about the nutritional side of this, but what about the medicinal side? I know, back in the more ancient days, they used a lot of plants, for our medicine instead of, I guess, again, this is out of my league, but chemical compounds that that people figure that go together to solve this. So have we lost a lot of the goodness of the medicinal?
Yeah. And there's a couple of different reasons to that. So let's first talk, plants, they are loaded up with all sorts of compounds, all sorts of molecules that have proven biological effects in the human body. Up until about 1864, it was plants were our medicine. Now, along with plants, hygiene plays a huge role in things. So it's one of the things to keep in mind, the increase in the ability to keep things clean and to sterilize wounds, and the understanding that you have to, keep things clean played a big role in human health. But plants were a big deal. And, going back tens of thousands of years, really, they say the first scientists were probably the herbalists of the tribe, where they were, someone was sick, they'd, throw something, some plant at it, and hey, the person got better. You might be familiar with Yule Gibbons. He was the wild food, from the 60s and 70s. Yep. There's many ways to eat a pine tree.
Yeah, right.
He wrote a book called Stalking the Healthful Herb. And his theory was that a large part of the medicinal benefit of wild plants was actually due to their increased nutritional value, getting more vitamin C, getting more vitamin A, that sort of thing. And so he did a lot of studies looking at the nutritional value of wild edible plants. Well, that ended up coloring the scientists' approach to medicinal plants. They thought, it's just vitamins, minerals. There's no real true medicinal value to it. But in the 80s, they started going, well, let's just take a look at it, because there's a lot of traditional use and there seems to be something going on. And since then, they really did find, there are molecules that do this and that, increase in nitric oxide, which lowers blood pressure, increases neural growth and neural connections in the brain, all sorts of things. Speeds up the processing of the liver, stimulates the immune system. There are compounds that do that in the plants. And so that's kind of reawoken the whole looking at traditional medicine, saying, there's something there.
Yeah.
I mentioned the date 1864. That was when the first chemist came up with a synthetic medicine, chloral hydrate, which was used as a sedative, as a, kind of like an ether sort of thing for people undergoing operations or surgeries, that sort of thing. That was kind of at the time of enlightenment when scientists said, hey, you know what? We have this power now. And as a chemist, I'm speaking for my tribe here. We have this power. We can make better. One of the issues with nature is, with the wild plants, the amount of the compound varies some from plant to plant and ecosystem and all that. So there was some hit or miss. The plants had power, but it was hard to get an absolute reproducible thing. So scientists said, hey, if we make the molecule, then we know exactly how much is in there and we can fine tune it and all that sort of thing. And so that whole let's search for synthetic forms occurred. So that was a big push. Another thing, if you think about it, the collecting the plants, storing the plants, turning them into medicine, that's very labor intensive. It requires a lot of time, it requires a lot of effort to do it on a mass scale. And so as the population grew, it became impossible. If you think, monoculture, a lot of the farming right now is designed so that it can be, harvested by machine.
Right.
And so that's not always possible with a lot of the medicinal plants, especially ones, that are wild.
Yeah.
And so it just became easier and more cost efficient to find a molecule, synthesize that molecule and say, here you go, here's the molecule, rather than the whole plant sort of thing.
So it kind of brought up a good a distinction in the medicinal side about I guess being preemptive versus, after something happens. And a lot of times we think, I think of, medicinal purposes as something happens, you're sick, you take something to treat it, to make you feel better. But I guess we could kind of look at that from some things you said as more preempting. If we eat these things, it may prevent us from getting sick.
I have to be careful because the FDA has certain rules about what you can and can't say.
Okay.
Not allowed to say like plants will prevent diseases, but they can stimulate the immune system. They could, people seem to have forgotten lately that they have an immune system. In fact, they have two immune systems. They have the innate and the active. The innate is the ones that are constantly patrolling the body, looking for invaders to try and get rid of it. And then the active is if the innate feels it's getting overwhelmed, it can't handle it, it releases the dogs of war, the killer white blood cells, to attack the things that it tags. And there are plants that will both support the innate and the active, speed up, especially in the case of the white blood cells, speed up the response time and the number of white blood cells that the body produces to attack invaders. So going back to the caveman lifestyle, looking at the bones, the average lifespan was 40 years.
Right.
Because by then you've suffered probably some sort of injury. You fell off a mountain, something like that.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of the plants help with what are generally considered lifestyle diseases. We spent a lot more time as cavemen than we did in the modern world, and our body is still designed to deal with the caveman threats and the caveman issues. Is there something out there going to eat me? Oh, heck, calories. Let's take all the calories we can because we may not find them tomorrow. Right. And so that's how we're programmed to respond to threats and also foods. I mean, they've shown that there are sensors in our stomach. When you get sugar, it sends a signal to the brain that says, hey, this stuff, eat more of it because you don't know when you're going to get it again. Well, yeah, I'm going to get it again in an hour.
Right.
But the caveman, it's like, this is a miracle.
Yeah, I must have a couple extra sensors of those.
But yeah, so by
I'm thinking of what sugar we have.
Incorporating the plants of our ancestors, that does help, give the body what it thinks it needs, what it evolved needing, what it evolved using to maintain its health. And corn products, not so much. Corn is a pretty recent invention as far as the human race is involved, but we get a lot of corn in our diet.
Yeah,
whereas
not that
a lot of the wild medicinal plants, not so much.
And not that not that there wasn't fish and beef and the animals back in that day, but I just assume they were harder to catch. Like you said, they could run, plants couldn't, and so I just figured that's why a lot of the ancient diets were built around plants. They were just easier to go out and capture than an animal that was moving.
Yeah. I talked about calories. I make a big deal of it. If you ever watch the History Channel alone, it's basically the Hunger Games. Who can manage their calories the most? Here in Texas, West Texas, the Native Americans had what they called second harvest. So they would eat, say, prickly pear cactus fruit loaded with seeds. The next day, they would go through their feces, find the undigested seeds, and consume them again because they were trying to squeeze every calorie they could out of the environment.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, we got Whataburger, so
yeah, exactly.
Much better thing.
Well, the other thing, a little bit maybe off topic, but I think our bodies are still on that, maybe not as much caveman as just the agrarian society, that we were for so long. We wake up at, when the sun comes up, we're out working, moving all day, and then, we go to bed. Whereas now, I get up and walk 10 feet to my desk, and I'm like, have to take a break because I'm winded. It's like, we just don't have the activity. We've got a lot more. We just have access to these high caloric foods, and then of course the awesome chefs that we have today. They jazz those up even more. But I think that's am I wrong in thinking that it's probably a good thing that plants can make a comeback because we're not in as much need for the calories as we were at one time when we were out plowing the fields behind a horse.
Right. Yeah, you're right. They did a study that 150 years ago, people were eating about the same number of calories as they are now, but they were rail thin because they were burning them off.
Right.
80% of the population in the United States was agricultural based, farming, growing, plowing, all that sort of thing.
Right.
And so there was a lot just more movement and activity and thought. And so sitting behind a desk is bad for us. So my belief, the closer your foods are to what you evolved eating, the better your body is going to respond to it, as opposed to some, frozen TV, frozen burrito or something like that. A lot of processed things. There's some real food in there. Yeah. But at least having part of your diet still back to what we evolved with.
Yeah.
Has benefits.
Yeah, and what we have found, I think, is as we have become more aware of everything, it's just some of it is the basic control over what we put in our bodies. Is when you buy the more packaged and pre-processed. I mean, you can look at the label, but there's who knows what some of that stuff is, and then now we can control better salt. I guess we'll take that kind of the big one. A lot of processed food has tons and tons of salt, and so we are able to control that much better when we're cooking and doing things ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's easy to use a lot of wild foods. I maybe I mentioned it or not, but the average person can probably get 10% of their food from the wild, between their house, their neighbors, down the street, things like that. Add to your salads, and you're out. It's funny, in my neighborhood, there's 800 houses, and when someone new moves in, they're told about me. They say, okay, there's this guy, he may knock on your door and ask to eat something from your yard. He's harmless.
It's like the stray dog running around.
Yeah. But on the other hand, now if someone needs something, I'm the guy that hey, does anyone have, the wrench for installing a faucet? Oh yeah, they have it, and so it's like the neighborhood caller, I don't know, center database.
Right.
That's cool.
Well, Merriwether,
I'm sorry, can I interject something?
Go
Okay,
ahead.
can you talk a little bit about Medicine Man Plant Company?
Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So, like I said, after years of just treating myself and through the classes and so forth, I finally was able to expand out into commercial products. So in January of 2020, we started Medicine Man Plant Co. And then the apocalypse hit.
Right. Great
But
timing.
what these are, so we have like the liver pill, which is burdock root and milk thistle and flaxseed. There's a lot of scientific support for burdock root speeding up the action of the liver. The milk thistle has found to maintain the integrity of liver cells under attack. If you eat a poisonous mushroom, the only thing they have right now to treat that, the liver damage caused by that, because it's usually what mushrooms do is attack the liver, is a milk thistle extract. So we got that in here. Then the flaxseed is in there to increase the bioavailability. I'll tell you right now, and I may get in trouble, a lot of herbal supplements, their main product is really expensive urine. So you want to make sure the plants are, set up to maximize the bioavailability, the bioabsorption. And we have the immune pill, and it's hard to focus here.
Mm-hmm.
So this has the elderberry, the echinacea, both of them shown to support the innate and active immune system. The self-heal, which helps block viruses from getting into cells. And then also cordyceps mushroom, which is an immune modulator. So if the immune system does start getting out of control, you might have heard a thing called a cytokine storm. There can be help tamp it down some to keep it, at the appropriate response, not too much, but also not too little. And then vitamin C, most people take vitamin C, but we threw it in here because vitamin C is actually the messenger molecule between the innate and the active immune system. And so if you're lacking in vitamin C, because it's used in so many different other processes in the body, your innate, it's kind of actually down low on the list of who gets to use it. And so if you don't have enough, it can't send the signal it needs to the active form.
Okay.
Brain pill, lion's mane, mushroom, sage, ginkgo leaf increases blood flow, increases neural connection, increases focus and attention.
That's the one I
And
need.
of course, the moneymaker, the libido pill. We don't probably have to go too detailed into that. And of course, like I said, the FDA says, it's the warning here. We can edit. Okay. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So whereas the individual plants have been tested, because the actual product has not, we can't make specific medical claims.
Okay.
So, but we can say the plants, and if you go to the website, I have all the scientific documentation. as a scientist, I need the proof. So
Right.
hopefully I didn't go too long on that. I'm
No,
sorry.
No, and I think it's an important distinction to make that you're not a guy that woke up yesterday and said, "Hey, I think I'm going to crush some plants and package them up." And so, I mean, the Ph.D. and that. Tell us what that is. What yours is in again? I think it's in the.
Okay. Yeah, physical organic chemistry. So, like I said, not making molecules, figuring out which molecule you need to accomplish a task.
Right.
And on that note, Roy was saying that he needed to find energy. What do you suggest for energy? What helps with energy?
Yeah. So, okay, there's two ways to approach it. So going back to the burdock root, it's been shown to speed up the process of the liver. When you are active and working, your muscles are producing lactic acid. It's a waste product of the action. And so the lactic acid is removed from the blood by the liver. There's an equilibrium that sets up, though. The muscles can only get rid of the lactic acid at a certain rate because at a point the blood kind of becomes saturated with it. So the more quickly you can get rid of it by the liver, the longer your muscles can eject the lactic acid. So there's a lot of data that shows the burdock root helps with overall physical endurance and strength because it helps prevent the fatigue that occurs in the muscles as they're working. Something I also really like is a mixture of turmeric, cayenne pepper, and black pepper. I put that on my eggs every morning. I have a shaker, and I put that on because that has been also shown to kind of increase metabolism, which has some uses, and blood flow. So you need the black pepper in there with the turmeric and the cayenne pepper to make those more bioabsorbed.
Okay.
Interesting.
So and so a mixture.
Because I had been, this has been a few years ago, I'd started taking a turmeric supplement. And then, when we kind of started getting back to cooking more and paying more attention, we actually got it in the ground form where, like you said, we can add it to the food. And I just felt like I was getting a better quality and more equal distribution, than taking the supplement. So been very happy with that, but mixing it with the black pepper and the cayenne, we'll check that out.
We're gonna have to try that one.
Yeah. So you're like 50% turmeric, 50% cayenne pepper, and just about 10%. So I guess you could say 45%, and 5%, 10% of the black pepper. You only need a little bit of black pepper mixed in with it. So it tastes really good.
Perfect.
All right. Yeah, I wrote that down. That's cool.
Ooh, can I give one other caveman tip?
Certainly.
Okay, so going back to the brain, one of the things that the human race evolved doing was throwing things at stuff. And it's been showing that helps the brain a lot.
I still do that.
It's still, no comment. But they've shown juggling. Learning to juggle is great, both exercise and for your brain. So
interesting.
Something to do. You spend 15 minutes a day juggling. So
okay.
All right.
And it's exercise for your brain and your body. And then eventually you get on like a ball and do it there. Yeah, you get the full body workout.
Oh my gosh.
Don't do it in the kitchen though. When you're first learning, someplace less breakable.
Oh, experience there, huh?
I can't believe I'm even going to say this, but the other day at lunch, I turned the TV on and the Beverly Hillbillies was on, and they were all excited. They were going to a parade where they had a possum juggler. So I guess when you get really good at it, you can try juggling possums. I guess.
There we go. Yeah.
All right, Merriwether. Anything else, Terry, before we wrap up?
No, I think that's it. I mean, I'm so glad that you shared about the Medicine Man Plant Company. Well, just all of the information that you gave us. Lots of food for thought.
Yeah.
Mind, body, and soul.
That's right. Well, tell everybody how they can reach out and get a hold of you and get in touch with the Medicine Man Plant Company as well.
Sure. So the website is medicinemanplantco.com. And then on Facebook, of course, Facebook, medicinemanplantco.com. I also have the website Foraging Texas, www.foragingtexas.com. It has over 225 plants with all sorts of pictures and information and maps, both of Texas and of all of North America, because it's become, nationwide sort of thing. So you can look up on there. I'm in the process of revamping it because it was started before smartphones. But my goal for the first quarter of 2021 is to make it a lot more smartphone friendly.
Yeah.
But you can find me there. And if you send an email to Medicine Man Plant Co, I'm the guy that answers it. So.
Okay. Yeah, and before we get too far away from that, why don't you tell us what are the foraging classes? How often do you do them? And I'm sure you can find out more information on the website, but just tell us a little bit more about what's involved in those.
Okay, so most of them will be a 4-hour excursion across some piece of property. They're usually hosted by historic sites or state parks or other organizations, museums. The list of upcoming class can be found on the Foraging Texas. It's mainly in mainly in Texas. But then I go up to Minnesota, at least once a year. And I'm also talking to some people out in Georgia, things like that, Louisiana. Okay. So we're expanding.
Okay. So you actually take people out into the field and help identify.
Yeah, because a lot of people, there's a fear factor. Yeah. They look at a plant and they're like, 80%, somewhat convinced it really looks, but and so, I take the hand and say, okay, here's, we look at all the structures, look at your research. This is the plant. Go ahead and eat it.
Yeah.
And, I encourage people, really, it's best if you have like 2 or 3 people along. So one can be taking notes and one can be videoing it all, because you want to go back and look at a lot of this stuff. But yeah, it's 4 hours wandering around, talking about the plants, what you can see, what you can eat, what you shouldn't eat.
Right.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. That sounds like a great excursion. So if y'all would just take some time to go over to the websites and check out Merriwether and all the great things that he's got going on. And we certainly, again, appreciate you taking time out of your day to be with us. It's been a very interesting and enlightening talk for sure.
Yes, Mark, thank you so much.
I like to talk about foraging.
Can't tell. Hide that well.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that's going to be it for us today. You can find us, of course, at www.feedingfatty.com. Of course, we are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and this will, when this episode goes live, of course, we will have the video up on YouTube. So check us out, and we're always open to suggestions for new and different topics. If you're a professional that deals in the fitness, nutrition arena, can help people out with their journeys on becoming healthier, we'd love to hear from you. So until next time, take care of each other and take care of yourself. I'm Roy.
I'm Terry. Bye. Thank you.
Merriwether.